Hello and welcome to another episode of If My Feet Could Talk, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything, really, all types of sports, but predominantly running and ultra running, amongst other things, as well as mental health, really, and anything that's either affects me, where I chat about where my feet have taken me, or with a guest. And I've had some wonderful guests over the last two seasons so far, and the next one is no different to that. We all have stories, whether it's sporting achievements, family, mental health, pretty much anything really. Our feet have been on extraordinary adventures and journeys. Now, my next guest, his feet have done some incredible things. Growing up in America, racing in some of the biggest events in the world, raising a family, running a business, a company, in fact, moving to the UK. He's been in demand recently quite a lot for setting an incredible fastest known time, to which only just got beaten a week later by a friend of ours, Damien Hall. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the legend that is John Kelly.
Okay.
Excellent. Welcome, John, to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, how are you and how's the family doing?
We're doing pretty well. So things are coming along. We've got another on the way soon. So lots of preparations and planning. Thank you. But doing pretty well. We've settled into a nice kind of COVID routine, I guess, here at home.
And how has COVID scenario sort of been for you guys as a family, obviously as a businessman as well as a runner? Has it been all right, or have you had to do a lot of changes?
We've been quite fortunate, I think, relative to a lot of people, and that I've been able to continue my job, really kind of unabated. I've been able to work remotely. Our children are young enough that the two youngest are not yet in school, and the other was just in reception this year, so was able to. My wife was able to do homeschool with them. So it's not been too horrible for us, I think, relative to what a lot of other people have faced in this time.
No, that's good. That's really pleasing to hear. So what I like to get my guests to do at the beginning of the podcast is sort of talk about where they're from and sort of where they grew up, just to give a little bit of a background to their life story, really. So tell us a bit about yourself, John.
Yeah, so I grew up in East Tennessee, there in the mountains, just actually right across the road from the Barkley Marathons course. So out in the middle of nowhere, a very tight-knit rural community where my family's been for about 200 years now, out on that farm. And I think I've got a rather interesting background and kind of the the convergence of the two sides of my family. My dad's side is from out there in that area with where my grandfather worked in the coal mines and as a prison guard and graduated 6th grade. And my mom's side of the family comes from a different area of the country, and grandpa has a PhD in nuclear physics from MIT and worked at one of the labs there. And so I'm equally proud of both parts of who I am, but two very different parts.
Where does your family stem from? Obviously, being a former colony of ours, where does your family's roots lie originally?
So Kelly is obviously Irish. Unfortunately, it's a bit too Irish, and that there's so many of us that we haven't been able to trace back exactly where we came from in terms of that line of the family. We just know they came over in the very early 1800s. There are a few branches of my mom's side that are more recently Irish that we've traced back to the Ballyfin area. So most of that comes from there. Actually, my mom did a bit of genealogy and also found that, the name's slipping my mind. One of William the Conqueror's kind of top lieutenants who lived in the Somerset area here is a direct ancestor of me. So that was kind of interesting to find.
That's cool.
Willem de Moyne, I think was his name.
That sounds quite interesting, actually. And I think if you delve further into your roots, you'll probably find out where your sort of sporting prowess may originate from, because of the place you're from, the type of characters that your family were originally before moving over to America. And I find that sort of stuff quite interesting.
It's hard to tell on some of that stuff, especially with some of the family members that don't actually do these endurance sports, that maybe it's in their genes. Maybe that's where I get it from, but it was just kind of hidden there.
Yeah, you've unlocked it. You've sort of found the key to that lock, and your potential came out, and that was quite evident. I was reading obviously your website and stuff, and you talk about you were quite a sporty kid growing up back over there. You ran. You were a good runner, but you claimed you weren't a great runner. But you did running, and you did various other sports. But you lost it when you sort of went to college and grad school. What happened there?
Well, I just wasn't all that focused on the running anymore. I didn't have a team around me. In high school, I was on the track and cross country team. Without that kind of team motivation, I didn't really get out there and do it much. I also didn't have a lot of time for it. Most of my athletics was centered around intramural sports, just kind of within the college, playing softball and flag football and things like that. So it wasn't until after about a 10-year dead period from running when I was leaving grad school, and I said, well, I've always wanted to see how I could do in a marathon. I should sign up for one.
And how old were you at this point, roughly?
28.
So you weren't every class as young, but you weren't exactly quite old. You weren't in your 30s, 40s like some of us that find running. So you were sort of mid-ground, really, weren't you?
Yeah.
During that point when you weren't running, did you feel you had something missing in your life, or did you just too busy to really not worry about that?
Yeah, I had a lot of other things kind of occupying me through college and through grad school. No, I just never really felt that, but I did always kind of want to just, again, see how I could do in the longer stuff. Because when I did run in high school, kind of the longer the races got, the better I did. But they didn't get any longer than 5K. And so that was, I felt not really long enough to tease out how well I could do. And bigger distances.
So you mentioned you entered your first marathon it was about 2013, is that right? The Marine Corps Marathon in Washington?
Yep. Yep.
How did that go for you? How was your first marathon and the training for it? How was that?
The training was not good. It was horribly insufficient. And when I signed up for a marathon, I kind of had this idea of it'd be cool to see if I could qualify for Boston. No idea if I could or what that would take. But I went out there anyway and kind of tried for it. And I came through the first half of the marathon actually kind of on pace. I was running like 7-minute miles, and I kind of thought, well, maybe I should take it down a notch, and dropped it 30 seconds a mile. And a few miles later started hurting a bit, and I was like, well, maybe I should slow down just a bit more. Dropped it to like 8-minute miles, and then right around mile 17 or 18, just
Yeah.
my legs just, it felt like someone wrapped 2 live electrical wires around them, and I was constantly cramping up so bad that I would just be frozen there on the road. And I really, those last 8 miles or so were a pretty big struggle. But I finished. Obviously not with how I wanted to finish, but it wasn't long before I said, my goal was to see how I could do. That wasn't a good indicator of how I could do. I need to prepare properly and then see what happens in one of these.
So you obviously you realized you made some errors, some mistakes during the race and during your training, and you look back and you changed the way you obviously trained, because you then went on to qualify for Boston. Is that right?
It took me 2 more tries. So the try after that, I at least upped my training volume to a kind of somewhat reasonable amount, and fell a bit short again on my next attempt. I think I was somewhere around like a 3:14, and to qualify you had to get a 3:05. And then my third attempt, I did some more proper training. Still self-coached at that point. I was really up until a year ago. But yeah, I came through in that one with a 2:49 and got my ticket to Boston. It was just the way the timing was. It was about a year and a half before I could actually run Boston. So that's when I kind of started thinking, well, I should at least stay in shape. What else can I do? There's this triathlon stuff. So someone told me there's this trail running stuff where you actually go race in the mountains. That sounds fun. I should try these other things, see how it goes.
That's normally, I think that's not normally happens to a lot of us that go into the ultra running world. We end up discovering this thing beyond 26.2 miles, because you start looking for races and you start being signposted elsewhere, and people telling you, oh, you should try this, you try that, and you seem to be going down the similar path to most people, and that
I think
sorry, that defines, you're not someone who went, right, I need to go look for something. You just started hearing these things.
Yeah, and the marathon running kind of gave me the indication that I could do this, but I had originally had my interest peaked in it through backpacking. I'd always enjoyed doing these long distance hikes. Just before my first marathon, my wife and I through hiked the John Muir Trail in California, which is about 220 miles. You're above 10,000 feet the whole time. Most of the time. You cross like 2 roads the entire time. Took us around 17 days, and I loved it. But in most people's lives, you don't have time to regularly do that sort of stuff. And so it was just kind of, well, if there's this trail running thing, I could see all of this stuff and so much less time. but I don't know if I can do it. And then, the marathon running kind of told me, yeah, I can do that. Let's give it a go.
So you started falling into the world of ultra runnings and triathlons. What was your first ultra marathon? What was the first event that sort of went, yes, this is it?
So I did a number of kind of informal things. In the U.S., we call them fat ass events. I don't really know where the name originated from, but it's kind of a you can call it either an informal race or a formal just training run. I think it's right at that point in the middle. There's no awards, no aid stations, none of that. And the Barkley is something that had always been on my mind for a long time, having grown up right across from the course, and was just again something that I kind of thought, well, it's out there, but I could never do that. And as I kind of progressed and kept getting better and getting a bit more experience, I eventually decided, yeah, well, maybe I should give it a go. And this was before the documentary, and I was able to get in, and that was as far as official races go, that was really my first official big one.
So your first sort of official race was this infamous secret, well, to most of us secret, you grew up there, so you knew about it, event, which isn't your standard event either. There's ways of entering. You've got a specific entry, and that was your first event. That's absolutely bonkers. The fact that you thought, I know, I'll give that a go. That's my first one. Most of us start, I don't know, maybe 50K, 100K. You've gone straight into the big boys.
Yeah, I kind of tend to do that. Jump in the deep end. When I signed up for a marathon, I hadn't raced in like 10 years, hadn't done anything over 10K. When I decided to do triathlon, the first thing I signed up for was an Ironman. And so I have this tendency to kind of aim really far and see how I do. And then I can kind of calibrate from there based on how close I come to that goal. And I found that I'm able to kind of progress much quicker that way by kind of accepting the fact that maybe the first time or two I'll aim big and come up short.
Yeah, because you've done some incredible things within your sporting career, and that includes standing on the podium with the American flag flying, the anthems, and all that sort of stuff during the ITU Long Course World Championships. The long course triathlon. How did that feel, standing on that podium, wearing obviously your nation's colours? It doesn't matter what country you represent. When you represent your country, it must be an amazing feeling running through you, especially if you end up on the podium as well.
Yeah, that was absolutely incredible. And I actually got my Facebook reminder today that was just about 2 years ago. And so that was in Denmark, the ITU Long Course World Championships, and I won my age group for that. And that's something that you kind of always dream about as a kid, if you're into sports. And that was an incredible moment. And of course, it was just my age group. It's not like it was an Olympic medal, but in the moment itself, and really even after the fact now, that doesn't matter. I got to do that, and that was just that was amazing to be able to.
It shows the caliber of your sporting potential and your sporting athleticism, where only the year before you finished the Barkley Marathon, and then the following year, 2 years ago, you're standing on a podium at a long course triathlon world championship. Not just any old podium. You took the title as well for your age group. That's incredible. Some people just stick to ultra marathon. Some people just stick to Ironman. You like to obviously mix it up. Do you think that helps your running, mixing it up?
I think it could have helped early on as far as building my fitness and a strong base without overtraining. What I did was, for the most part, I did triathlon in the summer, where it was extremely hot where I lived and extremely humid, and I didn't enjoy running as much in those conditions. So I hopped on the bike, and then in the winter, when it cooled off, I focused on ultra marathons, with Barkley kind of being the pinnacle of my season there in the spring, and then the Kona Ironman World Championship being the pinnacle of my my triathlon season. So I do think, I don't know if anyone else will ever do the Barkley Kona double in 1 year, but I had Kona the fall after I finished Barkley, and this is one of those things in sports that you know you'll be on both sides of some close calls, and so when I won that long course world championship title, I passed the next person, who, sorry to say, was from the UK. I passed him in the last 1K of the run on that, and so it was a very narrow margin of victory. Whereas Kona the year before, I missed the podium in a 9-hour race by 1 minute and 40 seconds. So you know you have it both ways, and that's part of what makes it so exciting and so great. And when you do come out on the right end of that.
Yeah, and I think you sort of nailed it in the head there as well. You know, it doesn't matter whether you are podium or not. The fact that you're challenging yourself to do the Barkley, then followed by a Kona, and then you do the ITU after a Barkley. It doesn't. You're constantly challenging yourself, and you won't improve unless we challenge ourselves. And that's something many of us need to do to take the next level. You've learned from your challenges that you've done, setting that high standard straight away.
Yeah, and that just again, you have to be willing to accept the risk of failure in doing that. But oftentimes, failure is the quickest path to eventual success.
Now, we've obviously just briefly talked about it, and you knew it was going to come up anyway. So the Barkley Marathons, you lived on the doorstep. You've obviously entered it more than once, but you were a finisher in 2017, and you were the 15th individual finisher, because there's some that have finished it once or twice before, but you were the 15th and currently the last person to finish. There hasn't been a finisher since. First of all, so people don't know what the Barkley Marathons are like. First of all, explain what the Barkley Marathons are like, and then tell us how that race went for you.
So it's a pretty unique event, to say the least. It's the physical demands are one aspect of it, the mental demands, and then more than anything, kind of the unpredictability of it. So just the basic stats, it's he calls it 100 miles. It's probably around 130. It's got about 70,000 feet of elevation gain during the race. It is mostly off trail and unmarked. You just get the route drawn on a map. You get some basic instructions, and you can take a compass and your map. You're not allowed GPS or any sort of electronic devices other than a cheap $10 watch that does nothing other than, tell the time. So that's difficult enough just from a physical aspect, but then also you don't know the start time until an hour before it starts. The weather can vary from below freezing to 30 degrees Celsius within the same 12-hour stretch. I've had it sweltering hot, and then that night I've been getting sleet and hail on me. And so there's a huge amount of variance of difficulties on the course, whether it's briars or rock ledges or other things that you have to get around. and it's quite the physical and mental struggle to be able to complete this. And like you said, since 1988, only 15 people have finished.
That's absolutely mad. And how did it feel for you to finally become a finisher on basically what is your home race?
Yeah, it was incredible. It wasn't at the time exactly how I had envisioned it, as I was a bit delirious and out of it at the moment. Was quite sleep deprived, and the weather had gotten rather bad on my last week there before I finished. But it was quite the surreal feeling to have really 3 years of work pay off in that moment, and to get that finish.
It's unbelievable. I remember following basically all the social media feed as that was going on, and obviously there was another potential finisher that year as well, wasn't there? But unfortunately, he made some errors and didn't become a finisher. But it was fantastic, basically watching a race that you couldn't physically watch, but seeing it all unravel as it goes off. And I love that sort of thing. But you've since gone on and had more successes, and that includes this year. You won 268 miles spine race over here in the UK. For those that don't know, it's a winter race up the Pennine Way, 268 miles, and you won it this year back in January. How did you find racing over here different to racing over in America?
So the terrain is quite different, for one thing. Here you're kind of racing on moorland and through these bogs, and the trail can be quite indistinct at times. The U.S., most trails are fairly clear, fairly easy to follow. They're through the woods, and so it's a nice cut path. There aren't any bogs to fall into, so that's a very different aspect. The weather can be a bit interesting in terms of the wind up in the British mountains. I've certainly had colder weather and the like, and hotter weather elsewhere, but the wind is something that can really get to you after that amount of time. And then again, with doing it in the middle of January here in the UK, you're really only working with about 8 hours of daylight per day. So it was quite harsh conditions to deal with, and a very demanding race.
Did you find yourself occasionally going, "Oh, for fuck's sake," every time you stood in a new bog or the wind was knocking you? Did you find yourself cursing a lot?
Yeah, and there are a couple of particularly bad spots there on the Pennine Way. Slateholm coming down from Tan Hill Inn, Blenkinsop Common, just before you get to Greenhead and Hadrian's Wall, just notoriously bad bogs, and the trail is quite indistinct, and if you get off of it by just a little bit, particularly if it's night, you're just thrashing about in heather, and it's hard enough to walk forward, much less run, and you can't find yourself your way back to just the right line, and it can make for some quite frustrating slow going.
Yeah, and obviously you came first overall this year, but unlike the Barkley Marathons, where we haven't had a female finisher yet, we've obviously had the year before Jasmine Paris smashed the field, making a new course record. Do you think there's a chance we have any females that are going to become a Barkley finisher? Do you have anyone in mind that could possibly do it?
Well, I would love to see Jasmine out there. I would love to see Courtney DeWalter out there. They both, I know, have interest in it, but it's something that takes a lot of commitment. It takes a big chunk out of your schedule as far as training and recovery go. and they both have a lot of things and a lot of big goals. And so, I kind of look at it as this, that, the only place where the average male has an advantage over the average female is physical strength. But that doesn't mean there aren't females that exceed most males on that. And the easy way of saying this is, I have finished Barkley. There are women who are faster and stronger than me. Therefore, it's impossible to say that it's not possible for a woman to finish Barkley. It takes the right person,
right woman,
has that physical skill set, and also the motivation and the mindset to push through things at Barkley. Because I don't care how fast or how physically strong you are, you're going to hit that point where you want to quit, and you have to have the motivation to push through that.
Yeah, and as we know, a lot of women have that motivational mental strength to deal with that situation.
Of course.
Obviously running the spine and winning the spine gave you some great knowledge for your recent Pennine Way fastest known time record, which you set on the same route in the same direction as the spine race. How are you feeling leading up to that fastest known time attempt? How were you? Were you in a good place? Were you feeling really strong? Where were you?
Yeah, I've been feeling good most of the year coming out of the spine. I've felt that my fitness has been in a really great place, better than it's ever been before. I was disappointed to not get to use that fitness for Barkley this year. I was back home in Tennessee for that stretch, and I went out and did some personal challenges there instead. That I laid down times that to be honest, I didn't think I would ever be able to do on those challenges. So my physical fitness was definitely in a good spot, and I think I maintained that pretty well going into the spine. It was mostly a matter of being able to figure out when I could do it in terms of the COVID restrictions, and also trying to find a decent weather window to do it.
Yeah, because obviously the whole Corona situation would have thrown things up in the air, with obviously guidelines waiting for them to come out and all that sort of stuff. So it would have affected your mental capability a little bit, because you weren't sure of when to be at your peak.
Yeah, and I also pushed back my originally. So originally I was going to do it in June, but then COVID-19 wouldn't allow that, and then I was going to do it as soon as the restrictions allowed people to be away from their home overnight. But then there was a rough stretch of weather, so I pushed it back another week. It was a solid month after I had originally planned on doing it, and it was a bit of kind of taper and untaper and maintain and just do the best I could in terms of being flexible for that start.
And you made the start line, you ran superbly all the way up, and you broke a 31-year-old record. At that point in time, when you found out you did it, obviously you kissed the wall, you got to the end, complained someone put a flower pot in the way. How did you feel when you realized you've accomplished something someone hasn't been able to do for 31 years?
That was another pretty surreal feeling, but one that took a bit of time to process. So, going into it, I wasn't sure if I was capable of it. This is a record that was set by an incredible athlete that has withstood many other challenges over the years. So to be able to get in under that was incredible, and for me really kind of affirmed where I was physically, and kind of opened the door for me for these other things that I can try and I can set my sights on, realizing that I'm at that level to be able to do that.
because obviously you hit the top, you broke the record, and then a week later, our friend Damien Hall decided to go and beat the record. And obviously, we can only apologise for being British for that side of things. But you broke a record that hadn't been broken for 31 years. You held it for a week, and it just so happened it was Damien who came along and attempted. Did you feel much disheartenment after that, or did you feel sort of, oh, maybe I could have done a bit better, and that was really my fault? Or did you give it your best shot, and that was just it at the time?
And yeah, so this is something Damien and I had discussed quite a bit throughout the lockdown. We originally planned on racing in opposite directions at the same time, but unfortunately our calendars didn't align. So it's not something he decided to go out and do. It's honestly, of course I wish I could have held it a little bit longer, enough time to kind of fully process the feeling of having it and to recover from it. But at the same time, it was all along nothing more than a stair step to continue progressing to what's possible farther. So Damien did put an exciting new bar there. And to be honest, after I finished, I definitely did the best I could with the conditions I had. I had some issues during my run that I was able to push through and still kind of use the threshold of the time cutoff of the record as motivation to keep moving. And on something like that, though, I want to be sure that I've given it my best effort, that I've really done the best I'm capable of doing to set a good bar there for others to aim for and to continue to progress what's possible. So I was kind of planning on returning again anyway before Damien broke it. And so now with Damien having set the bar even higher,
you've now got a new challenge.
That's great motivation for me, and it's I'm very much motivated by having that time cut off or by having a competitor there. I'm much more of a racer than I am a time trialer. So
yeah, and you're the type of person who, obviously, going by your history, will look back at what you did do and go, well, maybe I could have done that slightly different, or could have maybe timed that a bit better, or something to where you could have maybe improved on the time that you did. You appear to be that type of person.
Yeah, definitely. And anything of this length and this complexity, it's extremely hard to do it the best that you can on your first attempt, because you learn so much on that attempt. And also there are just a lot of things that can go wrong in something this long, whether it's weather or stomach conditions, or you turn your ankle, or really about anything. So you might have to try it more than once to get an attempt where nothing major, at least, goes wrong.
And speaking of things that could go wrong, obviously you've had your unsuccessful things throughout your career. It hasn't been top of the podium every single time. What was your first DNF, and how did you feel when you had it?
Well, outside of Barkley and outside of Grand Round, which is another kind of challenge that kind of almost the expectation is that you fail. In a normal race, my first DNF was last year at Ronda del Sims, which unfortunately the race doesn't exist anymore, so I don't know if I'll be able to get redemption. But that was quite the rough feeling, having done all that preparation and done all that planning and traveled there and to come away not only empty-handed, but having missed the opportunity to get to explore those mountains and that landscape. So it wasn't a fun feeling, but it's again an opportunity to reflect on what did go wrong, how I can prevent those in the future, and how I can learn from it and improve my preparation.
I think that's quite important as well for for anyone who hasn't had a DNF yet. When it does eventually come, it can knock you a bit sideways, and if you don't learn from it, it can affect your future races as well. So the point you made there is quite important. So what is your next adventure?
Well, and I'd also just like to add to that sometimes, especially as ultra runners, we're so intent on pushing through absolutely everything, no matter the cost. And sometimes when you look towards the future and your long-term results, a DNF is the best thing you can have. At Ronda del Cem, I had some heat issues. I was getting extremely overheated and just did not feel safe to continue. And if I had, I could have put myself in a spot where my body took an enormous amount of time to recover, if it ever did 100% recover. So sometimes those short-term losses really are about protecting long-term gains.
That's right. Yeah, bang on. So what's your next adventure, John?
So I mentioned just a bit ago that the Grand Round, which is something I kind of came up with and set off to do almost the moment I arrived here early last year. And so I'm going to do the 3 classic fell running rounds, the Patty Buckley and the Bob Graham and the Charlie Ramsey consecutively, and ride my bike in between them. So all in all, it's somewhere around 185 miles of running, 80-something thousand feet of climbing on the run, and then plus about 400 miles of cycling. So I'm looking to, I also got introduced to British mountain weather last year when I went out to do that and got absolutely hammered on the Patty Buckley and the Bob Graham. I did still finish them in under 24 hours, which was the goal, but it had disrupted my schedule and fatigued me to the point where I was way behind on sleep and didn't feel safe continuing to bike up narrow Scottish mountain highways through the night. So I called it there. So I'm going to be reattempting that here in a couple of weeks with a slightly different plan and different time frame. I'm still aiming to get all of the rounds in under 24 hours each, with a goal time total of 120 hours, which is breaks it up nice and even, 24 hours each for each of the 3 running parts and each of the 2 cycling parts.
That sounds absolutely epic. I look forward to following that one. So we're going to finish off with some quick fire questions, John, because I know we're obviously pressed for time. So your favorite snack during a run?
Well, I've got a whole list of US versus UK snacks. So in the UK, I have taken a liking to tonic bars. And in the US, I'm going to have to go with the oatmeal cream pie.
Nice. Do you have a favorite bit of kit that you always have to take with you on a run?
So if I'm headed out into the mountains, I've always got my head torch, lightweight rain jacket, the Ultimate Direction Ultra jacket works quite well, and also my Katadyn Be-Free water filter. So kind of the things I need to make it through a night, if need be. If it's harsher conditions, more than that, of course.
Okay, your favorite ever race that you've done?
I mean, I guess I have to go with Barkley on that one.
Fair enough. This one is probably a no-brainer. Which do you prefer, road or trail?
Trail.
Have you ever tried Marmite yet in the UK?
Not a fan.
He's not a fan. You either love it or you hate it. Okay. What do you miss the most about the US? Family aside.
Well, yeah. Family and then forests and some of the food options I miss.
What do you like the most about being in the UK?
Some of the terrain that I don't get to explore, and so really kind of the opposite, kind of the open moorland and the fells and the terrain I get to explore here, and then again some of the new foods that I get to sample.
Obviously, would you race Barkley again?
Yeah, definitely at some point. So I was going to be in it this year until I got canceled.
Your favourite film?
Whew, that's a tough one. I'd probably have to put Gladiator.
Oh, nice. And which do you prefer, early morning runs or late evening runs?
I'm not an early morning person, so late evening as long as it fits in with the family schedule.
And that's the question. So finally, John, we've had a lot of beginners start up during lockdown, and we like to call them lockdown runners and stuff. Do you have a bit of advice for the beginner runners about running?
So if you are getting started, it can be quite useful actually to do that run first thing when you wake up in the morning before other things can kind of knock it off the schedule or get in the way, and also so then you don't disrupt the rest of your day, whether it's job or family life or whatever. So I have, even though I don't like it as much, I have done that a lot during lockdown. And then once we are back in the office, run commutes. If you're able, if your office has the resources and it's a decent length, it's how I do all my weekday miles. And it's the only way I can fit it in.
Excellent. Obviously, if people want to follow you, especially with the grand round coming up, where can they find you?
So I've got my blog at randomforestrunner.com, and links to all my social media handles are there on the page, which most of them are some variant on Random Forest Runner.
Excellent. I will drop the links in the description as well. Thank you very much, John. It's been absolute pleasure. I'll obviously pause this in a second, and we'll have a little finish chat before you go. But for the podcast, thank you very much for giving up your precious time to have a chat with me. I've absolutely loved it, and I could have asked you so much, but obviously we're restricted with time. But thank you, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and congratulations on the spine victory and your fastest known time. It is in the record books, even though it's been beaten. It's still there in history. Congratulations, and I look forward to following you up on your grand round.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the chat.
Well, thank you very much. Wow, that was just incredible. I really enjoyed making that episode with John Kelly. He is truly a phenomenal athlete, especially when you hear that, he's working, he's got a family to support. He is still out there putting in top level performances. I mean, the fact that he gave his time just shows how great the ultra running community, when a guy at his top level is willing to give up a little bit of his life to help me make something like this. It's fantastic. Thank you to all those that have been watching and all those that have been listening, be it on YouTube or for the various podcast apps. Please subscribe, like, or give us a review on the apps. And let's get this podcast up there and out there. Until next time, you've been watching and listening to the Ultra Running Matlow, and this is the If My Feet Could Talk podcast. Thank you.